want to talk about one other important piece of news and notes from the preseason. That is that Aaron Rodgers, unlikely to play in the preseason at all. I saw you write about this on Yahoo, Frank, but it just feels like the Jets are in a bit of a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation, if you ask me.
I agree. Yeah, I totally I get it from both sides from Robert Saleh. And what I think is going to be really interesting, keep an eye on this. Robert Saleh basically came out and said, they asked him about it. And you could tell he was uncomfortable answering the question of, will he play in the third preseason game or will he play at all? And he said no for the first two. They said, what about the third? And he's like, well, my gut feeling is we'll see. And then he's like, actually, my gut feeling is no. I don't want him to play at all. Well, if Aaron Rodgers plays in that third preseason game, you kind of know it's another brick in the whole wall of Aaron Rodgers is just running the Jets now and he gets his way for everything. We'll see. I don't think he's going to play in that third preseason game. And there's two sides to this, and I get both sides. I get the Jets saying, why on earth are we risking a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury in a preseason game that doesn't matter? We lost him after 4 snaps last year. This doesn't make sense. On the other hand, do you really want his first snaps to be at San Francisco on Monday night of week 1? Like, that doesn't seem very smart. He has not thrown a pass in a game or completed a pass in a game that counts since January of 2023. Like, it has been a long time since Aaron Rodgers has really played meaningful football. But on the other hand, does a 4-time MVP really need the preseason? I don't know. I think you could go back and forth on this. I'm sure Robert Saleh and the Jets have gone back and forth on this. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers has given his input. I do think he's going to sit the preseason based on what we've heard. And yeah, they might start off a little bit slow, but I think it's just going to put the Jets' minds at ease to say, okay, we're going to get our quarterback at least to week 1. We're not going to lose him in the preseason. And I think ultimately that's probably the right call.
I mean, risk versus reward makes a lot of sense to me, but rust versus rest. I'm using all of the analogies now. But there is some element of, let's look at what we've seen, Frank. It took days. It took literally days of practice before videos everywhere of Aaron Rodgers yelling at his wide receivers about not being on the same page. And there's a little bit of an element of what did you expect? You weren't at OTAs, which you say don't matter, but now all of a sudden you're in practice and it feels contentious. And this comes back to the thing I keep saying on our shows together. The next time the Jets handle controversy well or chaos well will be the first time. So the fact that we're already seeing these things leak out, what happens on Monday night when they're taking on a great team with a great defense and a great coach that's going to come in and they're going to scheme the hell out of all of this? And then all of a sudden, you better hope that there's no rust and you better hope that there's no adverse effects and you better hope that he can take a hit and get back up. There are so many questions that are, I think, valid right now. And I know we just want to put everything in bubble wrap and say, okay, it's Aaron Rodgers. He's going to be fine. And the Jets are going to go to the Super Bowl. None of it's that simple for me. When you factor in the age and the time off and the injuries coming off of, and the fact that it's the Jets and how obsessed we already are with practice issues, man, I think that they are opening Pandora's box. I know why they're not playing him. I understand it. But let's be real. If he comes out and has a bad week 1, everyone is going to freak out.
Everyone will. Can you imagine him and Garrett Wilson have a miscommunication and Garrett goes one way, Aaron throws the other, and it's a pick 6 or something like that? The clip would be replayed 88 million times, including the clip of Aaron Rodgers yelling at Garrett Wilson and Garrett Wilson yelling back. We can already see it. You can see it in your head as I talk about this. And that's just the Jets. That's going to be the 2024 Jets. They realize everything's going to be blown out of proportion, almost to Cowboys levels. We'll see. I like the Jets going into that game. I actually did. I thought they could kind of maybe surprise the 49ers, whatever. But when you stop and think about the fact that their quarterback hasn't played, other than 4 snaps, a meaningful game in as long as he has, and with this franchise he never has, it's going to be hard for the Jets to win that game. It just is. It's going to be really hard with no preseason and no last season to come out and win at the defending NFC champions.
There's also an element of one standard. We look all the time at Deshaun Watson right now, and we say, well, I wonder how much impact it had that he was away for the game for a minute and it takes a minute to knock off the rust. And we try and have these reasonable conversations about just the play on the field for some guys as maybe a justification of why they aren't great. But then when we see other players coming off of injury, we never want to allow for that same forgiveness before it starts. I've said, how many times have I said Anthony Richardson missed so much of last season? I think it's fair to look at a team like the Colts and say, I don't know, man. I think AR has a chance to be great, but we got to see more, and he's got to knock the rust off. I think Kirk Cousins can be great, but he's also 87 years old and coming off an Achilles, and that makes me nervous. We all know Aaron Rodgers can be great, but he's also 932 years old coming off an Achilles. Like, I think it's okay to sit back and say, hey, guys, what we need to, and fans freak out about everything. Like, if you don't pick the Jets to go to the Super Bowl, then you must be an idiot and you don't understand the team and you've never watched them. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Well, what about a little bit of nuance in the expectation setting, simply to look at it and say, look, if Aaron Rodgers is great, yeah, the Jets are a Super Bowl contender. If it takes them 6 or 8 weeks to knock off the rust, they're going to be far enough behind the rest of a tough AFC that it's an uphill battle for them. And I don't think that that's spreading hate to anybody. That's just being reasonable in the analysis with some level of nuance.
Yeah, and I keep talking about this on this show, other shows, writing about it, thinking about it. The fact that they're in the first, I believe it, I need to get this correct. The first 7 games of the season, they play a standalone game 6 times, meaning either primetime or London, a game that every single NFL fan is going to be watching. It just puts such a microscope on them. And if Aaron Rodgers starts slow, the entire narrative of the NFL is going to be, this gamble isn't working. Aaron Rodgers is washed. The Jets are screwed. Like, it's going to be an overreaction, not just because it's the Jets, not just because it's Aaron Rodgers, but they are going to be in a standalone spot pretty much every single week to start the season. And if they start slow, like, it's going to get bad quickly just because of the situation they're in. This isn't the Cleveland Browns, like, where they can kind of hide back in anonymity a little bit. Like, no NFL team's anonymous, but there's a difference between the media market in Cleveland and the media market in New York. And there's going to be a freak out if Aaron Rodgers is rusty early in the season. You make good points. Like, we don't know. Like, this is such an unknown. If you could give me the answer, like one answer off of the test by the end of the year, how Aaron Rodgers plays, maybe even his stat line, you could figure out a lot of things for the rest of the season, because that is maybe the biggest variable we have going into the NFL season is, how is Aaron Rodgers going to be? He's not only coming off an Achilles with a new team that he's really never played for. He's 40. He's going to be 41 in December. If he's great, though, there's a possibility Aaron Rodgers is great. Like, we both have to account for that, too. If he's great, the Jets are going to the moon. Like, where is it? Is he going to be MVP-ish level? I don't think he's ever going to win another MVP, but is he going to be at that level? He's won 4 of them. Or is he going to look like an old man coming off an Achilles injury? We just really don't know. Yeah,
and that's allowed. That's the one thing that I will say so loud right now as we go into the season. It's allowed, and I think it's the toughest thing that we do in sports talk, whether we're on podcast or radio or digital, it doesn't matter. The toughest thing is that we are asked to write a book report after every chapter of a book. So after 1 week, we have to make these sweeping generalizations about where a team or a player is. Well, that'd be like after 1 chapter of a book. It's the best book I've ever read. Well, the next chapter might suck. And then you got to step back and you've got to reanalyze what you think of the book after 2 chapters and 3 chapters and 4 chapters. That's what we have to do when you talk about football.
Fitz. Jordan Love.
100%.
Me and Joe, my NFL editor, Joey Galino, we were talking about that this week, and just how go back. You can go back and listen to us after that, especially the Raiders game, talking about Jordan Love. We saw like fools, right? But in that moment, we were right. Like, Jordan Love was not good. He wasn't good in that game. He had a 73 rating or something after 8 games or whatever it was. Yes, it's impossible to know everything, and that's
the information changes.
Embrace that.
Like,
it changes completely.
The body of work, like, a team can look like trash to smart people that have spent their whole life around the game. A team can look like trash, and then in a few weeks, you're like, nope, they got it figured out. So I just think right now it's a real important reminder to everybody that listens to any football content that the hot takes on your team are based on the best information you have right now, and that information is going to change. And Aaron Rodgers is a perfect example of that. If it comes out cold, the one question is, will the Jets be patient enough as an organization if everything starts slowly to let it work itself out? That's the thing I don't know. Are they just suddenly going to start firing coaches? Is everybody going to go into a tizzy? Because it is. That's the biggest difference. When we talk about media market, I think the biggest difference is not the pressure the players feel day in and day out. I don't think being in New York changes the way a player plays on Sunday. What does change is that the organization constantly hears about it. And when your team sucks, then there's an impulse to want to make great sweeping change right away because everybody's yelling about it, as opposed to being in a market like Indianapolis or a market like Tennessee, where you can be bad for a prolonged amount of time. And frankly, it's like, yeah, we understand it. We get it. There's a little bit of media presence, but it's just not the same.